The stars shimmered against the black canvas of space as the hospital ship U.S. Nightingale moved steadily through the void. Its white hull gleamed, the Red Cross emblem standing out boldly against the sterile background. Inside, Dr. Olivia Barnes checked the medical supplies for the third time that morning. "Everything looks good," she said, nodding to the nurse beside her. "We should have enough to treat the radiation victims on Proxima Centauri IV." At 42, Olivia had spent nearly half her life aboard medical vessels like the Nightingale. Her brown hair was streaked with gray, her face lined with the memories of countless rescue missions. She had seen the worst the universe could offer, but she had never lost faith in humanity's mission to heal. The ship hummed quietly around her. 187 medical staff worked on board, each dedicated to the Terran Medical Corps motto, "We heal where others fear to tread." "Dr. Barnes," the ship's AI spoke through the overhead speakers, "Captain Rivera requests your presence on the bridge." Olivia made her way through the corridors. Doctors and nurses nodded as she passed, respect clear in their eyes. She had earned it over 20 years of service. Captain Alan Rivera stood by the main view screen when she arrived. His posture was stiff, unusual for the normally relaxed commander. "What's wrong, Ellen?" Olivia asked. He turned, his face grim. "We just received a distress call from the Mercy. They were attacked near the TAW system." Olivia felt her blood run cold. The Mercy was another medical ship, like the Nightingale. Attacked? By who? Pirates? No. Rivera shook his head. The message identified Zephyrian warships. And it's not just the Mercy. Reports are coming in from all over. Medical ships are being targeted specifically. The news didn't make sense to Olivia. The Zephyrian Empire had always been cold toward humans, but they respected galactic law. Medical ships were off-limits in any conflict. The ship's sensors blared suddenly. 3 ships just jumped in. The young officer at the scanner shouted, "Zephyrian design. Warships. Raise shields." Rivera ordered, but his command came too late. The first blast hit the Nightingale on its port side. The ship rocked violently, throwing Olivia against the wall. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel. "We're being hailed," the communications officer said, her voice shaking. The screen flickered to life, showing the Zephyrian commander. His scaled skin was a deep blue, his eyes yellow slits in an alien face. "Terran vessel," the Zephyrian said, "your healing ends today." The screen went dark as another blast rocked the ship. "They're targeting our engines," someone shouted over the noise. Rivera gripped Olivia's arm. "Get to the medical bay. Prepare for casualties and ready the escape pods." She ran through the corridors, which were now filled with smoke and frightened crew members. The medical bay was chaos when she arrived. Already, wounded staff were being brought in. "Set up triage," Olivia ordered, falling back on her training. "Prep the serious cases for escape pods." As she worked, saving those she could, the ship continued to take hits. The lights flickered and failed, emergency power casting everything in an eerie red glow. "Dr. Barnes," the ship's eye spoke again, its voice now distorted. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 5. 42% of medical staff lost. Captain Rivera orders all remaining personnel to evacuate." Olivia helped load the wounded into escape pods. The last pod was nearly full when a final massive blast tore through the ship. The floor beneath her feet buckled. "Go," she shouted to the pod operator as she pushed the final patient inside. The door sealed just as she jumped in herself. The pod ejected into space, spinning away from the dying Nightingale. Through the small viewport, Olivia watched in horror as the ship that had been her home broke apart in a series of explosions. But the nightmare wasn't over. The Zephyrian ships were turning, weapons locking onto the fleeing escape pods. "They can't," she whispered. "We're unarmed. We're doctors." The first escape pod exploded in a flash of light and debris. Then another, and another. Olivia closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as the Zephyrian ships approached her pod. Her last thought before the weapons locked on was simple. Why would anyone kill healers? The pod's communication system crackled to life. A human voice broke through, strong and clear. Hold on, Nightingale survivors. Earth Defense Force inbound. But for many of Earth's finest healers, help would come too late. Captain William Harris stared at the flood of distress signals lighting up the command center screens. His hands gripped the edge of the console until his knuckles turned white. Each red dot represented a medical ship under attack. Each fading signal meant more lives lost. Sir, the U.S. Nightingale just went dark. Lieutenant Fiona Reed reported, her voice breaking slightly. Earth Defense Force ships in the area report they arrived too late. They managed to rescue only 2 escape pods. William closed his eyes briefly. The Nightingale had been one of their largest hospital ships, with almost 200 medical personnel aboard. Any word from the Mercy or the Hope? He asked. Fiona shook her head. Nothing for the past hour, sir. The massive screen at the front of Earth Defense Headquarters showed the terrible pattern. Across 3 sectors of space, medical ships had been systematically targeted. No warnings, no demands, just destruction. Get me a direct line to the president, William said. 20 minutes later, the face of President Samuel Moore appeared on the private channel. The president looked as if he had aged 10 years, since William had last seen him a week ago. Captain Harris, tell me we have good news, the president said. No good news, sir. We've confirmed attacks on 32 medical vessels. Based on crew manifests, we estimate 7,000 medical personnel have been killed. The president's face hardened. And we're certain it's the Zephyrians. Yes, sir. Multiple survivors identified their ships, and we have visual confirmation from our rescue vessels. They'd broken every rule of galactic conduct, the president said quietly. Medical ships are protected under all treaties. William nodded. It appears to be a coordinated strike, sir. They specifically targeted our medical fleet. The president was silent for a long moment. The United Earth Council is meeting in 1 hour. I want you there, Captain. The United Earth Council chamber was rarely full. Earth's nations often sent only junior representatives to handle the day-to-day business of governing the planet. Today, every seat was filled with grim-faced leaders. William stood at attention as the president addressed the room. Today, humanity has suffered an unprovoked attack on those who represent our finest qualities, President Moore said. The Zephyrian Empire has specifically targeted our healers, doctors and nurses whose only mission was to provide medical care throughout the galaxy. Images appeared on the room's screens, the burning wreckage of medical ships, the faces of the dead. A woman near William began to cry softly. For the first time since the formation of this council, I am calling for a unanimous vote for military action, the president continued. Not just any military action. A specific response to show the galaxy what happens when someone strikes at the heart of humanity. The vote was quick and decisive. Not a single nation opposed the motion. Captain Harris, the president said, turning to William. You're now tasked with creating a new division within the Earth Defense Force. You will select the personnel, oversee their training, and direct their operations. What are we calling this unit, sir? William asked. The Angels of Death, the president replied. The name sent a chill through the room. Because that's what they'll bring to anyone who harms our healers. As William left the council chamber, his communicator beeped. A message from Commander Grace Kelly, one of the best Special Forces leaders in the service. He had worked with her 5 years ago during the Jupiter colony crisis. Heard about the new unit. Her message read, I want in. Those bastards killed my brother on the Hope. William thought of all the families receiving the same terrible news today. Thousands of them, learning that their loved ones had been murdered while trying to save lives. He typed a quick reply to Grace. Report to Mars Base Alpha in 48 hours. We're going hunting. That night, the news spread across Earth. Memorial services were held in every city. Pictures of the lost medical teams appeared on buildings and in homes. Children placed flowers beneath makeshift shrines. And in secret facilities around the planet, soldiers began to pack their gear, ready to answer the call to join the angels of death. The red dust of Mars swirled around the boots of Commander Grace Kelly as she walked across the landing pad. The secret base, hidden in the Valles Marineris Canyon, had been transformed in just 2 weeks. What was once a small research station now hummed with military activity. Grace looked up as a shuttle broke through the thin Martian atmosphere. Another group of recruits. This would be the last batch. She had reviewed thousands of files, looking for exactly the right people. "They're right on time," said Lieutenant Daniel Rodriguez, appearing at her side. His eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep. Grace knew he had been working through the night again, studying Zephyrian tactics. "Any word from Captain Harris?" Daniel asked. "He'll be on the next shuttle with the final equipment," Grace replied. "The Council approved everything we asked for." Daniel nodded. His face showed little emotion, but Grace knew what drove him. His sister had been a surgeon on the Nightingale. Her escape pod had been one of the first destroyed. The shuttle landed, and 30 men and women in standard Earth Defense Force uniforms filed out. They stood at attention in the swirling dust, waiting for orders. Grace walked slowly down the line, studying each face. "At ease," she said finally. "You all know why you're here. Each of you has a connection to our medical corps. Each of you has lost someone." A woman halfway down the line had tears in her eyes, but her posture remained rigid. Grace stopped in front of her. "Your name?" she asked. "Sergeant Lisa Chen, Commander. My husband was a nurse on the Mercy." Grace nodded. "That pain you feel. Hold on to it, but don't let it control you. We are not here for blind revenge. We are here for justice." She continued down the line. "You've been chosen not just for your skills, but for your understanding of what was lost. The Zephyrians didn't just kill doctors and nurses. They tried to kill what makes us human, our drive to heal, to save lives." Grace reached the end of the line and turned to face all of them. "From today, you are no longer part of your previous units. You are angels of death. Our mission is clear. We will dismantle the Zephyrian military piece by piece until they can never threaten another medical ship again." The training began immediately. 16 hours a day, the angels learned everything about their enemy. Engineer Kate Mitchell, who had lost her mother on the Hope, designed new stealth systems for their ships. "The Zephyrians rely on standard scanning technology," she explained, displaying diagrams on the large screen. "If we adjust our shield harmonics to these frequencies, we can slip past their outer defenses undetected." In another part of the base, Dr. Alex Freeman, one of the few survivors from the Nightingale, taught them Zephyrian biology. "Their nervous system is concentrated here and here," he said, pointing to a holographic image. "They feel pain differently than humans. They're also extremely sensitive to changes in air pressure." At night, when the rest of the base slept, Grace often found Daniel in the simulation room, running combat scenarios again and again. "You need rest," she told him one night, 3 weeks into training. Daniel shut down the simulation. The image of a Zephyrian battle cruiser faded from view. "I'll rest when it's done," he said. "We all lost people," Grace said softly. "But I need you at your best." Daniel finally looked at her. "My sister saved people. That's all she ever wanted to do. She never hurt anyone in her life." He turned away, but not before Grace saw the tears. "I keep thinking about her final moments. Was she scared? Did she know what was happening?" Grace placed her hand on his shoulder. "That's why we train. So no one else has to ask those questions." A month later, Captain Harris arrived with the ships. 3 sleek vessels, painted matte black with white wing insignias on their hulls. They had been stripped of all medical markings. These were not ships of healing. "The Valkyrie, the Azrael, and the Thanatos," Harris said, as the angels gathered to see their new vessels. "Earth's answer to those who would harm our healers." Grace looked at her team. They were ready. "Tomorrow, we hunt," she said. The Zephyrian outpost on Ta City hung in space like a twisted metal flower. 6 petal-shaped sections extended from a central hub, each housing different military functions. The outpost had stood for 50 years, a symbol of Zephyrian power in this sector. No one had ever attacked it successfully. Commander Vrex stood on the command deck, his scaled skin reflecting the blue light of the monitors. Reports from across Zephyrian space showed their attack on the human medical ships had gone perfectly. 7,000 healers dead. The humans would be in disarray, mourning their losses. "Sir," a junior officer called out, "we're detecting an energy spike near the outer sensor ring." Vrex flicked his tongue dismissively. "Probably a solar flare. Ta City has been active lately." "But sir, the pattern is..." The lights on the command deck suddenly went out. Emergency systems kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red. "What's happening?" Vrex demanded. "We've lost contact with the weapons control pedal," the communications officer reported, "and the defense grid is offline." Vrex felt the first stirrings of unease. "Send security teams to check." The entire station shuddered as an explosion tore through one of the pedals. Through the viewport, Vrex watched in horror as the weapons control section broke away from the main station, secondary explosions rippling across its surface. 3 ships decloaking. The sensor officer shouted, "Design unknown, but they appear to be human." Vrex stared at the screen as 3 black ships appeared from nowhere. They moved with impossible speed, targeting specific sections of the outpost with surgical precision. "Sir, they're hailing us," the communications officer said, voice shaking. A human female appeared on the main screen. Her dark hair was pulled back, her eyes cold. "This is Commander Grace Kelly of Earth's Angels of Death," she said. Her voice was calm, as if she were discussing the weather. "You targeted those who heal. We are those who harm." The screen went black. On board the Valkyrie, Grace turned to Daniel. "Phase 1 complete. Weapons systems neutralized." Daniel nodded, his hands flying over the tactical display. "Moving to Phase 2. Kate's stealth systems are working perfectly. They had no idea we were here until we wanted them to know." The 3 black ships moved in perfect coordination. The Azrael targeted the outpost communications array while the Thanatos disabled its engines. The Valkyrie, under Grace's command, kept the remaining Zephyrian fighters busy. "Sir, they're only hitting military targets," Lisa Chen reported from her station. "The civilian living quarters remain untouched." Grace nodded. "As planned. We're not them. We don't kill innocents." A Zephyrian fighter exploded as Daniel's precision shot hit its engine core. "That's the last of their defense ships," he said. Grace opened a channel to all 3 human vessels. Phase 3. Boarding parties ready. 20 angels in black combat suits launched from the ships. They moved through space using small propulsion units on their backs, the white wing insignias stark against the darkness. Inside the outpost, alarms blared as Zephyrian soldiers rushed to defend against the borders. But the angels were already inside, moving through corridors they had memorized from stolen blueprints. Sergeant Lisa Chen led her team to the command deck. Zephyrian guards fired energy weapons at them, but the angels' armor, designed by Kate Mitchell, absorbed the blasts. Lisa didn't hesitate. Her weapon fired darts that delivered a neural toxin specific to Zephyrian physiology. Not lethal, but enough to paralyze. One by one, the guards fell. Commander Vrex found himself face to face with the humans as they breached the command deck. He reached for his sidearm, but a dart caught him in the neck. His limbs went numb instantly. Lisa stepped over his paralyzed body and planted a small device on the main control panel. "Command deck secured," she reported through her comm. "Downloading their database now." 15 minutes later, the angels retreated to their ships. They had what they came for: intelligence on other Zephyrian military installations and proof of who had ordered the attacks on the medical ships. As the three black ships disappeared back into stealth mode, they left behind a message burned into the metal of the outpost hull, visible to any ship that would come to investigate. You targeted those who heal. We are those who harm. The first strike of the Angels of Death was complete. The Galactic Council chamber was a vast, circular room. Representatives from 117 species sat in rising tiers around a central speaking platform. Today, every seat was filled. News of the conflict between humans and Zephyrians had spread across the galaxy. Ambassador Patrick Lewis adjusted his formal diplomatic robes as he waited for his turn to speak. Beside him, Dr. Olivia Barnes sat quietly. Her face still showed signs of the injury she had suffered on the Nightingale, but she had insisted on coming. She wanted the council to see what the Zephyrians had done. The Zephyrian ambassador, a tall figure named Sorv, was speaking. His voice echoed around the chamber. "The humans have violated all rules of warfare," he said, his scaled hands gesturing dramatically. "Their ships appear without warning. They strike our peaceful outposts and disappear. They are cowards who will not face us directly." Murmurs ran through the assembled representatives. Patrick could see the doubt on many alien faces. The Zephyrians had been part of the galactic community for centuries longer than humans. They had allies. The Zephyrian Empire calls upon this council to condemn human aggression. Sorv continued. "We ask for sanctions against Earth until they recall their terrorist forces." The council leader, an ancient Fordelian whose skin had faded to pale blue with age, looked toward the human delegation. "Ambassador Lewis, you may respond to these accusations." Patrick walked slowly to the central platform. He carried a small data device in his hand. "Honored representatives," he began, "the Zephyrian ambassador speaks of rules of warfare. Yet 3 weeks ago, their forces violated the most sacred rule we all share." He activated the device. Above the platform, a hologram appeared showing the Nightingale with its clear medical markings. "This was the U.S. Nightingale," Patrick said quietly. "A hospital ship, unarmed, protected under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter, which all of us, including the Zephyrian Empire, have signed." The hologram changed to show the ship under attack, then breaking apart. Several council members gasped. The Nightingale was not alone. 32 medical vessels were attacked on the same day. Over 7,000 doctors, nurses, and medical staff were killed. Dr. Barnes stood up now, her presence a silent testimony. Patrick gestured to her. Dr. Olivia Barnes commanded the Nightingale. She watched her friends and colleagues die. She is one of only 12 survivors from that ship. The chamber was silent now. Patrick looked directly at the Zephyrian ambassador. "We recovered this from your military outpost at Ta City." He pressed another button on the device. A Zephyrian voice filled the chamber. It was a recorded military order. "Target medical vessels first. Leave no survivors. The humans must learn that their healing ways make them weak." Ambassador Sorv's scales darkened with rage or embarrassment. Patrick couldn't tell which. "The Angels of Death were created for one purpose," Patrick continued. "To ensure that those who target healers face justice. They have strict orders to avoid civilian casualties. They target only military installations, and they will continue until those responsible are held accountable." Across the galaxy, 3 more Zephyrian military bases faced the Angels that day. On the planet Zephyria Prime, Supreme Commander Melvax watched the reports come in with growing fear. His personal guard had been doubled, but it did little to ease his mind. "They hit the weapons facility on Draxus IV, his aide reported. Then the shipyards at Vega. And now the training academy on our moon. All within hours of each other." Melvax paced his office. How are they doing this? Our defenses are the strongest in the galaxy." The aide swallowed nervously. "Sir, there's something else. They left the same message at each location." "What message?" "A warning, burned into metal. It says, 'You targeted those who heal. We are those who harm.' And sir, they left a list." "What list?" Melvax demanded. Names. The names of every Zephyrian commander who participated in the attacks on the human medical ships. The Abe paused. Your name was at the top. For the first time in his military career, Supreme Commander Malvax felt fear creep along his spine. The angels were hunting them down, one by one, and they knew exactly who they were looking for. Back at the Galactic Council, the representatives voted. The Zephyrian request for sanctions against Earth was denied. Earth's response was deemed justified. 6 months into the conflict, the Angels of Death had struck 27 Zephyrian military targets. Not a single civilian had been harmed. The precision of the attacks had earned the Angels a fearsome reputation across the galaxy. Even species hostile to humans spoke of them with respect. On the Valkyrie, Commander Grace Kelly studied the holographic map of Zephyria Prime, the homeworld of their enemy. Intelligence gathered from their raids had revealed something that changed everything. "You're sure about this?" she asked, looking at Kate Mitchell. Kate nodded, her eyes tired from days of analyzing the data. "I've checked it 3 times. The Zephyrians weren't just targeting our medical ships because they thought healing was weakness. They were eliminating our best doctors because of this." She pulled up a new image. It showed molecular structures that Grace didn't recognize. "Bioweapons," Kate said simply, "designed specifically to attack human physiology. They needed to eliminate our medical corps first because they knew our doctors might find a cure." The room fell silent. What had seemed like an act of cruel warfare now looked like the first step in attempted genocide. "How close are they to deploying this?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. "Based on these files, they need another 3 months," Kate replied. Grace made her decision immediately. "We're going to Zephyria Prime. We end this now." Planning the mission took 2 weeks. Zephyria Prime was the most heavily defended planet in the Zephyrian Empire. No enemy had set foot on its surface in over 500 years. "The bioweapon facility is located beneath their high command," Grace explained to the assembled angels. "Our primary objective is to destroy all research and samples. Our secondary objective is to capture Supreme Commander Malvax. He ordered the attacks on our medical ships." The plan was the most daring they had attempted. 3 teams would infiltrate the planet. Daniel would lead Alpha Team to destroy the bioweapon lab. Lysa would lead Beta Team to create a diversion at the planetary defense grid. Grace would lead Gamma Team to find Malvax. They used a cargo ship as cover, hiding their signatures among the thousands of ships that brought supplies to the capital city each day. The Angels dropped in small stealth pods designed to look like space debris if detected. Daniel's team landed first, in the mountains 10 miles from the capital. They moved through the night, using the cover of a violent thunderstorm to approach the city. "Central, this is Alpha Team," Daniel whispered into his comm as they reached the edge of the massive high command complex. "In position." "Copy Alpha," Grace's voice came back. "Beta Team is ready. Diversion begins in 3, 2, 1. On the other side of the city, Lisa's team triggered explosions at the Defense Grid Control Center. Alarms wailed across the capital. Zephyrian troops rushed toward the disturbance. Daniel led his team through a maintenance tunnel they had identified from stolen blueprints. The bioweapon lab was 5 levels below ground. They encountered minimal resistance at first. Most security forces had responded to the diversion. But as they reached the lower levels, they met specialized guards. "These aren't regular soldiers," Daniel said as his team took cover from energy weapon fire. "They're using different tactics." The firefight was brief but intense. 2 angels were wounded, but the Zephyrian guards were neutralized. Finally, they reached the lab. Daniel felt sick as he saw the testing chambers. Some contained human tissue samples. The Zephyrians had been experimenting on captured humans. "Download everything, then plant the charges," he ordered. "We need proof for the Galactic Council." As his team worked, Daniel discovered a sealed room at the back of the lab. Inside, he found something worse than the bioweapon research: plans for a full-scale invasion of Earth, scheduled to begin after the bioweapon was deployed. Central, this is Alpha, Daniel said urgently. Mission parameters have changed. We found evidence. This was just the beginning. They plan to wipe us out completely. Before Grace could respond, a security door slammed shut, cutting Daniel off from his team. Gas began to pour into the room. Alpha Team, report. Grace's voice came over the comm, but Daniel couldn't respond as armed Zephyrians entered through a hidden door. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the face of General Vexor, the mastermind behind the attacks on Earth's medical ships. Daniel woke up in a cell with a pounding headache. The walls were smooth metal with no visible door. A single light glowed from the ceiling. He tried to move and found his hands bound by energy restraints. The famous angels of death, a voice said. Not so fearsome up close. The wall in front of Daniel shimmered and became transparent. On the other side stood General Vexor. His blue scales gleamed under the bright lights of what looked like an interrogation room. Where is my team? Daniel demanded. Some escaped. Some did not. Vexor replied simply. But you are the prize. Lieutenant Daniel Rodriguez, second in command of the Angels. Daniel said nothing. He had been trained for capture. Give no information. Show no fear. Your mission failed, Vexor continued. The bioweapon program continues. Your bombs were discovered before they could detonate. Daniel kept his face blank, but inside he felt cold fear. If they hadn't destroyed the lab, billions of humans would die. I want to understand you humans, Vexor said, moving closer to the transparent wall. Why do you value weakness so much? Your medical ships, your doctors. You waste resources saving the sick and injured. We don't see it as weakness, Daniel replied before he could stop himself. Vexor's eyes narrowed. Then what is it? Strength, Daniel said. Real strength. Not just destroying what threatens you, but saving what needs help. The Zephyrian made a sound like sharp rocks sliding together. Daniel realized it was laughter. Your sister thought the same way, Vexor said. Daniel lunged forward despite his restraints. Don't you dare talk about her. Dr. Elena Rodriguez. She was on the Nightingale. I reviewed the target list myself. Vexor's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. She died quickly, if that matters to you. Daniel forced himself to breathe slowly. Getting angry wouldn't help him escape, and he needed to escape. His hidden emergency beacon had been activated when he woke. The angels would be looking for him. Meanwhile, back on the Valkyrie, Grace received Daniel's signal. We've got him, she told the gathered team. But he's in the most secure facility on the planet. Lisa studied the layout on the screen. The detention center is built into a mountain. Only one way in or out. Dr. Olivia Barnes, who had joined the Angels as an advisor after the Galactic Council meeting, stepped forward. I might have a solution. All eyes turned to her. I've been studying Zephyrian physiology, she said. They're highly sensitive to certain sound frequencies. It disrupts their nervous system temporarily. Grace nodded slowly. A non-lethal way to get in. I didn't join the Angels to kill, Olivia said firmly. I joined to prevent more deaths. Within hours, a new plan formed. Kate modified their weapons to emit the frequencies Dr. Barnes had identified. The rescue team would go in small and fast. Back in his cell, Daniel was trying to understand his enemy. Why attack us first? He asked Vexor during another interrogation session. Your empire is larger. You have more ships, more weapons. Because you are dangerous, Vexor replied. Not your weapons. Your ideas. Your healing spreads across the galaxy like a disease. Species that once valued strength now speak of mercy, of helping the weak instead of letting them die as nature intended. Daniel saw something then. Fear, not of human weapons, but of human values. You're afraid we're right, he said softly. Vexor slammed a scaled fist against the wall. Your ways weaken the galaxy. The strong must rule. The weak must perish. That is the natural order. Is that why you developed the bioweapon? Because you couldn't win with your ideas? The general turned away. Enough talk. Tomorrow you will be moved to Zephyria Prime's moon for public execution. The galaxy will see what happens to Earth's angels of death. As Vexor left, Daniel felt a faint vibration through the floor, a sound too low for human ears to detect, but he had been briefed on Dr. Barnes' discovery. The rescue was coming. He smiled for the first time since his capture. "You still don't understand us, General," he whispered to the empty room. "Angels never come alone." The sound that humans couldn't hear brought every Zephyrian guard in the detention center to their knees. They clutched their heads as their nervous systems overloaded with pain. Grace led the rescue team through the now unguarded corridors. Olivia Barnes moved with them, carrying a medical kit. She had insisted on coming, despite the danger. "His signal is coming from cell block 7, Lisa said, checking her scanner. They found the control panel that operated the cell doors. Kate quickly bypassed the security system. One by one, the cell walls turned transparent, revealing their contents. "There," Olivia pointed. Daniel looked up as his cell wall disappeared. His face showed relief when he saw Grace, then concern when he noticed Olivia. "Doctor, you shouldn't be here," he said as Grace removed his restraints. "I go where I'm needed," Olivia replied simply, checking him for injuries. "We need to move," Grace urged. "The sound generator will only work for another 5 minutes." Daniel grabbed her arm. "The bioweapon lab wasn't destroyed, and it's worse than we thought. They plan to invade Earth after they release it." Grace's face hardened. "Then we have 2 missions now. Get you out and finish what we started." They made their way back toward the entrance. The facility was in chaos. Zephyrian soldiers lay incapacitated in the corridors, but they would recover soon. As they reached the main security gate, an alarm blared. The sound generator had failed earlier than expected. "We've got company," Lisa warned, as her scanner showed multiple Zephyrian life signs approaching rapidly. "Go," Grace ordered. "Get Daniel and the doctor to the ship. I'll hold them off and meet you there." Daniel shook his head. "Not without you." "That's an order, Lieutenant," Grace said firmly. Before Daniel could argue further, the doors at the end of the corridor burst open. General Vexor entered, flanked by a dozen armed guards who wore special headgear that protected them from the sound. "No one is leaving," Vexor snarled. Grace pushed the others toward the exit. "Go now." As Daniel reluctantly led the team away, Grace turned to face Vexor. The Zephyrian general's eyes widened in recognition. "Commander Kelly," he said, "the leader of the Angels herself. This is an unexpected honor." Grace raised her weapon. "You ordered the attack on our medical ships. You killed thousands of unarmed doctors and nurses." "They were making the galaxy weak," Vexor replied. "Just as you humans have always done, spreading your poisonous ideas about mercy and healing. And you would respond with genocide," Grace said, "with bioweapons that target innocent civilians." Vexor moved closer, his guards training their weapons on Grace. "The weak must perish. That is the natural order." "No," Grace said quietly. "The natural order is balance. Life and death, creation and destruction, healing and harm." She slowly lowered her weapon. Vexor looked confused. "You surrender?" he asked. "I show you the true strength of humanity," Grace replied. Then she lunged forward with unexpected speed. The guards fired, but Grace had trained for this moment for months. She dodged, rolled, and came up directly in front of Vexor. In one smooth motion, she injected him with a specially prepared sedative from Dr. Barnes. The general collapsed as his guards surrounded Grace. But the delay had worked. Daniel and the others had reached the ship. And now they returned, having triggered explosives that rocked the entire facility. The guards scattered as ceiling panels fell around them. Daniel pulled Grace to safety as the detention center began to collapse. "What did you do to him?" Daniel asked, looking at the unconscious Vexor. Showed mercy, Grace replied. We're taking him back to Earth to stand trial. They carried the Zephyrian general to their ship as secondary explosions destroyed the bioweapon lab for good. The evidence they had gathered was sent to the Galactic Council even as they escaped the planet. 1 month later, the Zephyrian Empire surrendered unconditionally. The exposure of their bioweapon program and planned genocide had turned even their allies against them. On Earth, a memorial garden was planted for the 7,000 healers who had been killed. Beside it stood a smaller monument to the Angels of Death, who had been disbanded now that justice was served. Dr. Olivia Barnes stood looking at both monuments, remembering friends lost on the Nightingale. Daniel joined her, his uniform gone, replaced by civilian clothes. What will you do now? Olivia asked him. Daniel smiled softly. What my sister would have wanted. I'm starting medical training next month. Olivia nodded in approval. From Angel of Death to Angel of Life. The best revenge, Daniel said, looking up at the stars where humanity continued its mission of healing, is to keep doing what they tried to destroy.